Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's Ethnic Media Services Zoom News Conference. I'm Sunita Sarabji, Health Editor at Ethnic Media Services and your moderator for today's briefing. And before we begin, I would like to thank EMS founder Sandy Close and Associate Editor Pilar Marrero for helping to organize today's conference, where we discuss the taboo topic of fat. And before we begin, I would like to ask each of you to use the reaction emoji to answer this question. Are you happy with your weight? Thumbs up or thumbs down, or sad emoji to answer this question?
I don't know how to do that, but I'll try.
It's in your reactions. All right, let's see. I see one thumbs up, two thumbs up. This is interesting. A lot of happy faces. Oh, okay. A couple of thumbs down, but this is very interesting. And there's not a men versus women differential on how we view our bodies, which is quite interesting. I was expecting there to be a gender divide, but there is not. So that is very interesting. Let's take another couple of seconds. Anyone else want to weigh in here? Okay, so you'll see that not a lot of women are unhappy, or men are unhappy with their weight, which is surprising to me because I thought that there would be a lot of thumbs down or sad face emojis. So let's continue on. Americans are getting fatter. 1/3 of US residents are considered overweight by traditional BMI standards, and 2 out of 5 adults are obese. About 20% of children are overweight or obese, and the rise in weight comes amid a culture mandating thinness as new weight loss drugs promoted by celebrities and influencers claim that anyone can be thin. Speakers this week will discuss the history of stigma surrounding fatness, the seeming demise of the body positivity movement, and the push towards an anti-diet culture, the impact of new weight loss drugs, the role of social media in creating negative self-perception and unhealthy dieting behaviors among teens and young adults. And we are going to have an interview next week with Dr. Elizabeth Poole of the University of Connecticut, who will discuss childhood obesity's link to school bullying. So our distinguished lineup today includes Dr. Susie Orbach, psychoanalytic psychotherapist, and the author of the seminal Fat is a Feminist Issue. Dr. Gary Goldfield, senior scientist at the CHEO Research Institute with the Healthy Active Living and Obesity Research Group, and Jasmyne Cannick, who writes frequently on race, politics, and social issues, and is an award-winning journalist. We ask speakers to speak slowly for our interpreters in Spanish, Mandarin, and Korean, and we ask reporters to enter their questions in the chat, which we will address after each speaker. Our speakers are also encouraged to answer questions in chat throughout the conference. We will send a video of today's briefing and expanded bios with contact information for each speaker to all participants later on today. So we begin first with Dr. Susie Orbach, who wishes to be called Susie. So welcome, Susie.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. So I'm going to start you off with some questions. What was the environment for women when you wrote Fat is a Feminist Issue in 1978? We were not an obese society then, but was there still a tangible stigma surrounding weight?
There was. I mean, it was the height of the women's liberation movement, second wave. And it was at that point, we investigated everything, the health system, the construction trades, the police system, but nobody had begun to look at the body, except for the fact that women with bodies were under assault, but nobody had really looked at what was going on in relation to size, or the notion of size, or the fact that we were living in a visual culture that was pressing us to be smaller and smaller and smaller.
Mhm.
And it seemed to me a way of linking the difficulties women were having with taking up space in the world and the difficulties of being seen in multidimensional ways, had a lot to do with a stigma around, not that people were fat, but the idea of fatness was so scary to people that I wanted to write about the idea of fat and what it does to us as a way of scaring the pants off us, in a way, as though somehow you were excluded from the culture. And it was a call to not be frightened about our appetites, not be frightened about food, to throw away diets, to dare to occupy our bodies, to live in our bodies. Now, at the time, when I wrote Fifi, I said that my main experience was with white women. And I got a lot of letters from people saying, I'm sorry, this is my experience too. You don't need to exclude me out of this experience, because whether I live within the African American community or the Italian American community or the Irish English community, I too experience this prejudice, this which is inside of me. I wake up every morning, women were saying, judging myself, being frightened of my appetites, being scared to live a life. And the book spoke to all of those things, I think, sadly, and it's still in print in England, so it's still speaking to this younger generation.
Absolutely. And you wrote in the book, and this was a phenomenal piece of insight to me, that women do choose to be fat and to gain weight as a way of asserting themselves, if I'm correct, in society.
Well, I think it was an unconscious thing. Obviously, I'm a psychoanalyst, so I'm going to be thinking, what do we do that we don't mean to be doing, but we do mean to be doing? And I think what I was trying to say is that the idea of fat was a form of protection. It was, maybe I can define myself if I'm not the size and I'm not getting projected onto me who everybody else thinks I should be. Maybe this is a sign of strength. Maybe this is a rejection of the ways that I've been brought up to diminish myself. Maybe I'm making the world look at me and look at me again. I think those were the kinds of ideas that I was learning from women, and also, of course, from myself. And so I also wanted to raise the question of, well, there may be something very scary about the idea of being thin, because maybe the set of expectations are problematic. Maybe, and if we fast forward, maybe I have to be performing all the time, like the kids now. I've got to be on display. I've got to be playing to camera rather than I actually can live a life inside of myself.
Mhm,
Now, I don't
absolutely.
think it was uncomplicated. Fatness and thinness are not uncomplicated ideas. And I still think of, when I wrote Fifi, it was an idea in the mind rather than necessarily adiposity, right? It wasn't necessarily how large you were. It was the idea that there was something that you were failing. There was something you needed to criticize yourself for all the time.
Right, right. Could you describe the changes you've seen in attitudes towards fat since your first book? Have we become a more fat phobic culture?
Well, I think there's such a hatred of fat people now. I mean, the people who are not fat, physically fat, are so scared of fat that they project onto other people that there's something second class, not okay, greedy, awful about people. And in my own practice, I'm a general psychotherapist. I don't just work on, what's been really interesting to me is that people used to come in with troubled bodies or troubled eating and want to work on it. Now, people of all sizes take for granted that they are going to have troubled bodies. They don't think that they can change the situation. They've come to think of their body as something they have to produce, that they have to work on, that they have to manufacture, if you like, that it's not a place to live from. That is very different than 40 plus years ago. And also, I suppose the other thing is you never escape it. I mean, you know, I can see old ladies walking on Regent's Park or Primrose Hill where I live, and they're doubled over because they've suffered with anorexia for many years in their attempt not to be fat, whatever fat means to them. I see the assault on women all the time, and increasingly on little girls and little boys and on men. I mean, we are talking about huge industries. The richest people in Europe, the 4 richest people, are the manufacturers either of clothing or of cosmetics. And they make a lot of money because they make people feel rubbish about their bodies. They don't succeed in making those profits because they're making us feel good. They first make us feel bad, and then they send us these items, which we think will make us feel better as a way of trying to feel okay in our bodies. And I think the body has become one of the secretive big industries in our world. It's capitalism has reached into not just our bodies, but is sold thinness around the world. It's deconstructed, it's attacked other cultures whose body shapes may be very different. And you know, in an experiment that was done in Fiji, for example, when TB came out there in 1990, I'm going to forget the year, but anyway, 2 years after it came out, the 11.9% of the teenage girls were over the toilet bowl with bulimia because they wanted a Western body. And they didn't perceive the bulimia as a negative thing. They saw it as a sense of agency, that they could opt in to the culture if they looked like shows like Friends. So it's a very complex issue. And I think when we look at Wegovia and what's going on now, and it looks like it's okay, so now we can all do it. We can all have that body. What we forget is, A, what the hell? What about the food manufacturers? What have they done? What are they producing? But number 2, as the chief economist of UBS said, it's a Spotify system. You have to be on a subscription, and it's very expensive. So it's yet another way of exploiting people and another way of hooking them into feeling that they can't live with their bodies and find a way to have harmony and eat with their hunger and stop when they're full and eat food that's actually real. I'm sorry, that was a very long answer.
No, that's excellent. I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to open it up to questions from reporters. Susie, how do we get to healthier attitudes surrounding weight and people of all sizes?
I don't think we can do it on our own. Look, I was part of a movement, and I think we've got to stop telling people they look great all the time because they've lost weight. We've got to start actually looking at people's characteristics and enjoying them. I think we've got to dare to say, I've had enough, thank you, or no. I think we've also got to dare to eat real food and recognize not just our physical appetites, but our emotional appetites and respond to those. I mean, it's a hell of a struggle when you have industries that really are not interested, and forget social media for the moment. Even if you didn't have that, there are industries that are so fantastically successful at making us feel really bad about ourselves from the minute we wake up.
Absolutely.
So I don't see anything but collective action, frankly.
Interesting.
And, you know, we've had summits around the world because we think that girls and men have that the body is endangered. It's like an endangered species. The idea of a body that's actually developing in concert with other bodies that has variety and difference is something that's very fast disappearing. And we need to start from our bodies as well. And we need to be able to live from them and occupy them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. There are so many questions for you in the chat. I'll start with Pilar Marrero. Pilar, I think Dr. Goldfield is going to answer your question in his remarks, but do you have another question for Dr. Orbach?
No, it's okay. Just go ahead, because there are so many good questions from others. Yeah, go for it.
We'll go to Henrietta Burrows. Henrietta.
Yeah, I think Henrietta going to speak, or I'm going to read it out?
Yes. No.
She's going to speak. The reporters asked their questions directly.
There was a time when fat was considered a good sign. It meant that people were able to eat, and it was a sign of prosperity. And so I had asked what happened that and I guess you've talked about some of what happened, but it seems
well, I think it was
we can eat that. It seems quite ironic now that we can eat and have plenty of food, that fat is no longer considered a sign of a good sign.
Yeah, I think that happened very early on. I think it was an accident of history in the post-war period, as particularly in England, as it got more prosperous, you got the appreciation of long lines and the sense that we didn't need to eat. The exporting of it is very, very interesting, because I think once North America and England worked out that they could make people feel very uneasy and insecure in their bodies, and I'm not even sure it was that conscious, they saw a market that they could sell everywhere else. And they sold it in Kenya, they sold bodies back to China, they sold Western eyelids to Korea, it became, and your Mexican example is absolutely astute, because up until the 50s, all around the world, because of poverty, weight was considered a real sign. It was a social status, but class came in and changed that whole thing. And the new icon and the new way of belonging was to be able to adopt a westernized body, so to speak, right? Even if it meant, breaking your legs and putting in a leg extension, even if it meant narrowing yourself. So when I say Western bodies, I'm really talking about what was done in the fashion and visual culture field. And even though there were attempts and to show variety, it was quite small, really. It was quite little. And obviously I grew up at a time when it was post-war. I was supposed to eat everything, because God forbid one shouldn't, and one should suffer, given that what people had come out of.
Absolutely. Jose Neil Donis has a question for you. Jose, could you ask your first question, please, and identify your news organization?
Thank you for the opportunity. Jose Donis from Al Día in America is a Spanish bilingual publication in Louisville, Kentucky. So my question
America.
is...
Yes.
So the question is, do you have any feedback, ideas, suggestions on how to talk to teenagers, especially girls? As a parent, and also it's not me, like many people, we are afraid to even talking about the subject with teenagers, because I'm afraid of saying the wrong thing.
I think it's really tricky. Have you got any who are not quite teenagers yet?
Have I what?
Have you got any who aren't yet teenagers? Because I think we need to start earlier. We need to start with, we don't know how your body's going to, when they start at 8 or 9 saying, I might have you this, you just say, we don't know how your body's developed throughout life. When you're 9 and 10, you have this, and when you're 10 and 11, and we don't know if you're going to have Grandma Lily's breasts, or whether you're going to have, the length of Uncle so-and-so. Bodies are places to live from that change. They change through life. And it's really hard to have all of this sense that your body isn't all right when your bodies are okay. And I think the only thing to say to your teenage girls, particularly, and boys, is try to eat when you're hungry, try to stop when you're full, and try to remember that your body is there for you to live from, to move, to give you pleasure, to dance. It isn't there only for display. It's really there for its self-expression.
Okay, thank you for that. And the other part of the question is when you mentioned Western bodies, to me that is a little bit, I don't know, confusing. I've been to Europe maybe 4 or 5 times in the last 4 or 5 years, and I notice, and also in Latin America, I also notice when people mention about or talk about Americans, they see Americans as a heavier bodies now, not as a, the usual.
True.
You know what I mean? So that's a little, I would say, confusing. I don't know.
I think it
It's not
is
what I do.
confusing. I think that's a good criticism. I accept that. I'm really talking in shorthand because I have so few minutes. And I think that's right. And I think there is a class divide also in America, as well as a poverty divide. But there's also the appropriation of bodies from different countries, right? So now, Brazilian bottoms were loved about 5 years ago. And whereas we were selling breasts into Brazil, right, which was never prized. And there's an awful lot in this. And I'm sorry to be superficial because I do think it's a very, very complex and very moving issue all the time, which for me has raised the question of how we get the body we get psychologically, how we feel the body and how we can feel safe in it. And I'll put some readings on the chat.
Susie, thank you so much. Please do stick around for a final round of questions at the end.
Okay.
And I know that there are still a number of questions for you, which I think will be answered by the next speakers. We move on to Jasmyne Cannick, who will discuss the body positivity movement and the seeming shift away from the movement, even as body positivities and influencers embrace the new weight loss drugs. Jasmyne will also discuss the new anti-diet movement, largely fueled on by food companies. Welcome, Jasmyne.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm not a doctor. I just bring lived experience to the conversation.
And that's exactly what we need.
So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Please start with your remarks.
Oh, sure. So yeah, that is a great place to start. I bring lived experience to this. In my day-to-day life, I do a lot of work. But I do this work as a Black woman who has been overweight, and overweight according to American medical, how we define overweight, which I always bring up because it is very culturally insensitive, I think. So the way that for example, me as a Black woman, how my body shape, my body weight is defined next to a white woman of the same height, same age, right? So the work that I do impacts my image, right? I work in politics, I work in media. It is very much a how you look industry, right? People gravitate towards you or away from you based on how you look. People used to say to me all the time, oh, you need your own TV show and you need this and you need that. And I would say, yeah, I'm too fat for that, because we like our anchors and we like our reporters on television to have a certain look. And I didn't have that look. So when I say I bring lived experience, that's the lens through which I see things. So I recently had written an op-ed about the anti-diet movement. Actually, I first wrote an op-ed about Lizzo quitting social media over not being able to handle all the criticism that she was facing. And that morphed into me doing a commentary around the anti-diet movement, both common denominators really being our bodies and our weight, right? And just for me as a Black woman, what I see and how I process things. And also letting folks know, like, look, people who have been with me for years are like, she goes up, she goes down, she goes up, she goes down, she's going down. What's going on there? Ozempic. Yeah, that's what's going on right here. And I talked a little bit about my own experience and why I chose to get on Ozempic. I'm very much invested in this conversation around body positivity and body neutrality, but also wanting to have a real conversation at the same time about how social media plays such a huge role in a lot of decisions that we make. And also wanting to acknowledge that, look, the way we discussed weight and looked at weight in America 10, 20, 30 years ago is not the same as we do right now. There have definitely been some positive changes that have happened. I have to tell you, as a plus size woman, I feel more secure in who I am in terms of posting photos online and doing things like that, because there has been so much more acceptance of different types of body sizes. However, as was mentioned earlier, we have the BBL phenomenon. We have all of these other things going on that also play a role, I think, in how Americans in particular feel about themselves. And I will say that it's not just a teenage thing or a tween thing. It is also an issue for older millennials, Gen Xers. Like, we're all sort of cognizant of our appearance and how we look. And I think someone's not on mute.
Whoever's
perfect.
off
I think he just
could you
muted,
please mute yourself? Just
go ahead.
Circle back and talk about the article you wrote about Lizzo, and then the article that you wrote most recently about the anti-diet movement. Both of those were just such enlightening stories.
Thank you. So the Lizzo one, look, I keep it real, and that is what I am known for, and I'm always going to be that way. And so when I heard that Lizzo, I knew she wasn't going to really quit social media because that's how she made her millions. So that's a whole nother conversation. But when she said she was quitting all the bullying and everything online, and I just, I wanted to have a real conversation with people and say, hey, first of all, you get what you get when you jump on social media. Look, you get criticism or you get praise, but you don't get to pick and choose. When you, me, anyone who engages on social media, we take our chances. There is no social media platform for positive vibes only. It doesn't work that way. So even when I write an op-ed and I put it out there, I do like a commentary or post a live or whatever, I may get 20 people that are like, hey, we agree with you. We love what you said. But I'm also going to get the, you're fat, you're Black, you're ugly. I get all of that, right? And I keep it pushing, okay? But Lizzo, to me, and it's not, Lizzo, Lizzo's a plus size woman, but she also sort of made her name by saying, hey, I'm a plus size girl and I'm going to wear what I want to wear, even if it's no clothes. And I'm going to show my complete entire butt on social media and do all of these things. And she had to know that there were going to be some people that were cheering her on and other folks that were going to be like, no, I don't think so. So I wanted to start trying for us to have like a real conversation about that, because we talk about cyberbullying and we talk about all of these other issues, that phobia, just all these things. But it's like, look, social media is basically the world getting to judge you. I mean, it is. When I post a photo in an outfit, hey, I'm taking my chances. Maybe some people will be like, oh, that's a cute outfit. Let me go get that, or let me give her a compliment. But sometimes I get messages that aren't so nice. And for Lizzo as an entertainer who made her, I'm not saying that she's not talented, and she is talented. And I talked about that in my piece. I'm actually a fan of her music. But the reality is that Lizzo was Lizzo somewhere in the world, and we didn't know anything about her until social media really made her a darling, not just of America, but of the entire world. So to find out that now she wants to quit the same medium, the same, platform that made her, I thought was very interesting. And her weight had a lot to do with the conversations that people were having because of how she portrays herself on the internet, just in terms of the clothes she chooses to wear and not to wear, and what she chooses to post. And so I followed that up by just, sort of taking a look at the Washington Post recent article that they had done on big food and the anti-diet movement. And I also wanted to have a real conversation about that. Like, anytime you got big food partnering with anybody to promote something as foolish as basically eat what you want to eat, like eat now, pay later, all of our eyebrows should be going up. And I find it really interesting too that, no shade to dietitians, I know that that is a profession. I have nothing against dietitians, but dietitians are doctors. And what I do notice is that I don't hear a lot of doctors partnering with big food, talking about eat what you want to eat and feel good and feed your mental hunger. Feeding, when I was feeding my mental hunger in the way that I was feeding it, I was on my way to being a diabetic. When I started on Ozempic, my A1C level was 1 point below being an official diabetic. And my doctor was like, hey, Jasmine, either you make some changes or we're going to have to declare you. And I really didn't want to be a diabetic because I had seen what my people in my family had gone through. And so I decided to make some changes in my lifestyle. And to know that there is a movement out there that is basically telling people to ignore all of the hopefully good common sense that they have and just, eat what they want to eat regardless of the cost, just so you can feel better, that is a load of crap. And that is going to help people get into an early grade. And so my recent op-ed was just really looking at that, throwing in some personal experience, because look, as a writer, as a journalist, just as a human being, like I write about things that I feel really strongly about, and I do feel really strongly about weight and fat phobia, and we have all these nice fancy new names we like to use for things, but this idea of fatness, I grew up in a time when you were told you were fat even when you weren't. I wish I was the weight that I was when I had people in my life, my family, telling me I was fat when I was 12, 13, 14, and I wasn't fat, and now here I am at my age and I'm like, oh man, that wasn't even fat. But that was the pressure, folks in my generation were under back then. And now I know I recently saw quite a few articles talking about how tweens are like the number one, or becoming the number one consumer of like body and beauty products. I'm like, what? Do you not see a problem with that? Like, that to me is absolutely ridiculous. And so I love being the catalyst to have these types of conversations and to be a part of these conversations. And so that, that's what obviously made y'all reach out to me and say, hey, would you participate in this today? And so, yeah, that's why I'm here, for us to talk about that and have these sort of real conversations about how real life intersects with all of these, these little issues that we're dealing with. But the big food and the anti-diet movement is really going to help big pharma in the end. It'll help big pharma, and it will help all the other industries that profit off of sick people and sick and obese people, sick and morbidly obese people.
Absolutely. We have a question for you from Elena Kuzetsnova from Slavic Sacramento. Elena, could you please ask your question?
Yes. Hello, everybody. I have two questions. And first of all, thank you for raising this topic. My first question is, do you think that body positive culture, understood in the wrong way, made impact on number of overweight people? What I mean understood in the wrong way, as my understanding is that body positivity means not to shame other people for being overweight, because we don't know what they're struggling, what the struggles they have. But people think that, oh, I'm in the wrong way, think that, oh, now we can be overweight. Now it's like a new normal for us. So this is my understanding of wrong understanding. It's first question. And the second one is, at the same time, when everybody talks about body positivity, why does Ozempic gain so much more popularity and used inappropriate, sorry, not in the right way by so many people? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'll take the last part first. Look, I didn't know anything about Ozempic until my doctor brought it up to me. And at the time, I had enrolled in my healthcare's medical weight loss program, and I was doing everything I could do not to have surgery. So I am one of those people who just, I don't know, I just didn't want to have a weight loss surgery, right? And so then when Ozempic was proposed to me, it took me a minute to warm up to it because I'm like really not into needles, right? But then when I saw what it was and how it was, I was like, oh, this is nothing. So I started that journey. And then it was shortly after that that I became really aware, at least in America, how popular it was, to the point where it would be time for me to go get my refill and they were out. Like they would just be like, we're out, we don't have enough in stock. And I was just like, oh my goodness. I think the short and easy answer to that is that it's an easy way to lose weight. How hard is it to give yourself a shot every week? A shot that's going to make you not have an appetite in the way that you normally would have an appetite. If you take Ozempic and do no exercise, you're going to lose weight. Okay. Now I play tennis and do a bunch of other things. So I try to add to it, but I'm just saying it's an easy way to lose weight. And I think that, and it's a fast way. So it's easy and it's fast and it's not surgery. I think the issue that we're seeing with a lot of folks in America is the cost, the price point of it. Right. And so I remember one time when I went to go pick up my Ozempic and something happened with my insurance. And it was like $1,300 or something. And I looked at the pharmacist like, well, you know, I'm not paying for that. So go back there and figure out how to fix it and bring it down to the cost I'm supposed to pay. But it is a really expensive drug. So I think being one shot a week, being that you don't even really have to exercise, and that it works pretty quickly. I think that, and people don't have to put any thought into it, right? I don't have to literally sit down and say to myself, don't eat all of that, Jasmine, because I'm not going to have the appetite to eat all of that. Like it does that mental work for you, okay? But there's some other side effects that you got to deal with. And that's, I think, why a lot of people have such a fascination and love for it. In terms of the body positivity movement, yeah, I think there are like unintended, like, I think with a lot of these movements, like they have these sort of unintended consequences that happen, right? So on the one hand, you know, we have morphed into this society, or at least, you know, I think folks think we're trying to morph into this society. And I think this is also being driven by younger generations, right? And I think that needs to be looked at too. You know, we're just gonna, you know, we accept all bodies, you know. Okay, and with younger generations, you got to put a label and a new name on everything like it never existed before. So now they call it body positivity. At the same time, then now there's body neutrality. Like they need a whole glossary because there's all these different terms. But the idea with body positivity, and I think you were mentioning, like, you know, yeah, so if we're okay and we accept every single body, then it's like we're also, you know, not being cognizant maybe of our own health and our weight. And I think sometimes part of the problem with the conversations that we have a lot of times, and I'm sure the doctors can speak more to this, is that when we look at weight, we look at it from a term of beauty versus health. So sometimes a lot of times on social media particularly, you'll hear people all the time, they just say this about Lizzo, probably still do. Oh, she's big, but she's healthy. She's fine. She can move across the stage and do all these dance moves and twerk. That does not mean that she is healthy.
I'm so sorry, but we are running out of time and I've got to move on to stick with our...
That's fine.
Will you stick around for a final round of questions?
Absolutely.
I really appreciate it.
I hope
I'm
I
sorry
answered the question, though.
Absolutely. We move on to Dr. Gary Goldfield, who is going to be discussing the role of social media in self-perception and self-esteem, and how reducing one's social media usage might promote a healthier body image. Dr. Goldfield will also, I'm sorry. Here we go, Dr. Goldfield, welcome.
Thank you for having me, Sunita. I feel a little bit embarrassed because I prepared some slides and my talk is a bit more academic and maybe not quite as conversational as Jasmyne's has been and Susie. Is that okay if I share my screen?
Absolutely, yes, yes.
All right, let's see. Share screen. Okay.
All right, and any reporters, please mute yourselves. There's some background noise, so if everybody could just mute, that would be terrific. Thank you.
Okay.
We see your screen.
Okay, great. So anyway, thanks for having me. As Jasmyne pointed out, all of these issues are interrelated, and I wanted to talk about the influences that social media can have on body image among impressionable young teens. So we've heard a lot about our sociocultural influences on body image and how that can shape our sense of selves and our sense of being, and that certainly has evolved over the decades. One thing that has stayed pretty constant or has grown is the prevalence of body dissatisfaction, which is about, and it's a global problem. It's not just a North America problem. And with the advent of social media having such broad reach, now the exposure to unrealistic and unattainable ideals is just becoming exponential compared to watching a few hours of TV or reading a Vogue magazine. So there are some really strong driving forces that contribute to high social media use. It's becoming normative in our culture. And we've heard a lot about big food and how much influence they have over consumption and our health. But big technology is kind of like the new big tobacco. They're designing social media products, Instagram with very little regulation, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, with aggressive algorithms, constant notifications that are keeping these kids tied to their devices. And our research, along with others, is showing that actual social media, the drive to use social media is stronger than the drive to eat palatable food, which is scary because food in the laboratory and in the real world has actually been shown to compete with drugs of abuse. So essentially, social media might be as addictive as drugs. And the prevalence of problematic social media use is rising and rising and rising. And we have a very serious public health problem on our hands. Also taking, what's colliding with this is not only do you have big tech and vulnerability during adolescence. And adolescence is a period where body image is more important for self-esteem than in any other life period. It's also a period of time where social validation and need for acceptance and sensitivity to social rejection is also more pronounced. So it's kind of a perfect storm between developmental needs, big tech being aggressive with these algorithms. So if someone were to look up healthy ways to lose weight, they will be fed nonstop all kinds of unhealthy ways to lose weight that will take them down a rabbit hole and has been shown scientifically to contribute to disordered eating and full-blown eating disorders. The COVID pandemic has increased that tenfold because we are inside and we are on our screens more. So we all know that social media is prevalent. Here's some Canadian stats, but it's in most Western countries, kids are using social media more than 2 to 3 hours a day. This is based on self-report, so of course it's actually higher. We know self-report underestimates use, and a reliable finding globally is that females use social media more than males, and they use it more for social reasons, whereas males tend to use it more for out of boredom and more for entertainment. As I alluded to, body dissatisfaction is a global problem. So let's look at the relationship between social media and body image. So this is a very popular media model, how media influences body image and our eating and our self-esteem. And really, social media is no different, except it instead of exposure to maybe 20 unrealistic ideals from watching TV or watching the occasional movie, now it's potentially thousands a day. So we're bombarded by these unattainable beauty ideals that have been many of these images in the media and social media, whether it be influencers or celebrities or just the average person posting. Almost all of them have been photo edited, so they're not projecting reality. Cindy Crawford has come out and said, what you see in those magazines is not me. I've been photo edited. So what message are we sending our youth? That the most beautiful supermodels in the world are not quite pretty enough. We have to edit their images. But a lot of these kids don't know that. And I think bringing a critical lens to what you see on social media is really important to how you, whether or not you internalize that as your own standard of beauty. And the more you internalize those, and we're all products of our environment, right? These kids all of us, we get bombed by these unrealistic, unattainable ideals that then become our standard, our benchmark for which we compare ourselves to. And the more we compare ourselves to those unattainable ideals, the worse we will feel about our bodies, about ourselves, and that will drive disordered eating and full-blown eating disorders. And so looking at a meta-analysis, which is pooling across all kinds of studies, we wanted to investigate the relationship between social media use and body image. And sure enough, there was a pretty strong correlation between hours spent on social media use and body dissatisfaction. So the more time spent on body image, the worse people felt about their bodies. And this pooled across 36,552 young adults and included teenagers. But these data are correlational. So what that means is we don't know if social media is driving the body dissatisfaction or whether people who are dissatisfied with their bodies and maybe their lives and maybe feeling lonely are more likely to use social media. And I wanted to investigate this more of a causal link. So what we did, I'll just skip ahead to my experimental study, is so we randomized 220 youth who were ages 17 to 25, and the experiment required them to reduce social media from about 3 hours a day to 1 for 3 weeks. It was a proof of concept study, and we wanted to see what would happen. And the control group were just told to use social media as they normally would. And we measured their social media use through embedded trackers in the iPhone, excuse me, and every day they had to send us screenshots of their use. So we could see whether they were meeting the goal, how much they were using, and we used some behavior modification to coach them into trying to adhere. Luckily, the intervention worked very well. As you can see here, both groups were at about close to 180 minutes of social media on their phones. And the intervention group, they didn't quite meet the 60-minute per day goal. They were about more like 70. Still, more than a 50% reduction in social media use for those 3 weeks. Our prevailing thought was if we can reduce social media use, we can reduce all of that exposure to those unhealthy ideals, photo-edited pictures, and that would lead to improved body image. And that's exactly what we found. over 3 weeks, weight esteem and body esteem improved in the intervention group who reduced social media use, but not in the control group who didn't. And appearance esteem as well. And so, this clearly highlights a causal role that social media may play in the development of body image or in disordered eating. And clearly limiting it seems to have benefits. Thank you. I am going to unshare my screen now, and I'm happy to take any
questions.
Questions, yes.
All right. So a few questions have already come through. How young are the kids that you are seeing that get social media accounts, particularly Instagram and TikTok?
Well, despite big tech saying that they have age requirements, it's pretty easy to bypass that. It's a simple question right now. How old are you? So you can easily put in a fake birthday. 95% of youth in North America have smartphones at the age of 12. So 12 to 13. So these kids are young, they're impressionable, and there appear to be developmental sensitivities around puberty. So the relationships between social media and mental health are stronger earlier on, 11 to 13 for girls and 12 to 14 for boys.
Interesting. I read a horrifying report, I think it was in the Times a few days ago, about adults using their children in social media accounts and promoting very unhealthy body images to monetize their social media. Could you talk a little bit about that and how, parents themselves are promoting these unhealthy body images on their children, effectively monetizing their children on social media?
Yeah, I my blood boils when I hear stories or read stories about that. I think it's vaulting us back to back to the 50s. It's objectifying our children, and that's exactly the opposite message we should be giving them. We shouldn't be monetizing on their beauty or their talents. We should let them be children and let them be youth and grow up and in this online culture of influencers, and it's a way to get discovered. Justin Bieber got discovered on the internet. It is what it is, but I think parents have to have some responsibility to protect their kids, because certainly there are enough people out there who may be looking to exploit them. They certainly don't need to be exploited, by their own family members. So I have obviously a concern about that.
Absolutely. Henrietta Burrows has a question for you. Henrietta, please ask your question.
Thanks, Sunita.
Sure.
Dr. Goldfield, several times you mentioned disordered eating and eating disorders. What's the difference?
Excellent question. So disordered eating is often a precursor. So typically in the scientific literature, that involves strict dieting, that involves, it could be unhealthy weight control practices, like for males, especially athletes, will exercise in saunas, or excessive exercising, or excessively going to the gym. It could involve emotional eating, essentially an unhealthy relationship with food, binge eating, but it's not at a level where it's a full-blown eating disorder. So it's what we call subclinical. So it's there. It may be causing some interference in functioning, but it's not full-blown. And we know the prevalence of disordered eating is actually quite high, especially in women, especially in teens, whereas actually diagnosable anorexia and bulimia is actually quite low.
Thank you. Yeah. Susie, a question came in for you, and I'm not sure if you want to answer this or not, but you were Princess Diana's therapist. And, here's one of the most beautiful women in the world, and yet she was struggling with bulimia. Could you talk about that a little bit? You're still muted.
I know. Obviously, I can't talk about anything to do with somebody that I might have worked with. I mean, that happens to be in the public domain as information, but I can't really talk about patients. I never would. Everybody in the books that I write is a made-up person, because it would be too disrespectful.
Absolutely. All right, so we come to the end of our briefing, and I wanted to end by asking each of our speakers to provide a 30-second soundbite of their most important takeaway from this briefing, and your headline for if you were writing the story, as all of us are going to do after this call. What would your headline be? Let's start with you, Jasmyne.
Oh, why me?
Because you're the writer.
I mean, I think my takeaway from the conversation is that when you talk about weight, when you talk about body image, the intersectionality is real. And I think that we should always remember that. I love sitting on panels with academics and doctors and everything, but there are real people like me, right, at the end of all of those statistics. And there's, people who are living, these lives, right, that are influenced by all of the things that we discussed today. If I was writing the headline, I guess the headline would be, I don't know, that's such a good question. I mean, I am a writer, but to come up with one like right on the spot, I don't know. Yeah, you're gonna have to pass me on that one. But that would be my takeaway, just in terms of just remember there are real people. When you do stories around weight, you should, go talk to people who are struggling with their body image and with their weight, and get their feedback and their take on it.
Absolutely. Dr. Goldfield.
Thanks, Jasmyne. I actually had a lot of slides on social media and differences and how it impacts body image and mental health by ethnicity and by race, but for 7 minutes I wasn't able to get to it, so I had to cut the ball. But I do.
Well, Dr. Goldfield, if you will send your slides on to Jessica, we can forward those on to reporters to use for their stories.
Okay. Oh, perfect. I guess my takeaway would be, when it comes to social media and body image and mental health, less is more. I think our studies show that, and we're not saying eliminate social media, but less is more, and just spend more time with your family, with your friends, engaged in life, out in nature, pursuing hobbies, interests, whether it be music or arts and crafts or board games or puzzles. Find your passion, but just don't substitute one screen for another. Just be more engaged with life. And I think that's an important path to feeling better in one's skin and happier and healthier.
Nancy Tran just gave you a thumbs up on your social media less is more headline. So there we go. Dr. Orbach, we conclude with you.
I don't think I'm a headline writer. I write lots for the newspapers, but I think my point would be, can we dare to live from our bodies? Can we dare to know our appetites, really know them, stay present for our hungers? We know when to pee, we know when to stop peeing. That is what we need to do in relation to our actual physical appetites. And we also need to develop our emotional appetites so that we can find real nourishment. And I don't know, the social media question is very, very serious. With little girls are playing with apps at 3 that are teaching them how to change their bodies. Right. They're cosmetic surgery apps. They should be banned. It's not just, we know this is dangerous stuff. So ban apps for 3 and 4-year-old girls, telling them that their bodies are infinitely malleable. So those are a lot of different thoughts. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you to all our speakers for those very robust and very insightful briefing today. We will see all our reporters next Friday. Thank you again.